Welcome to the video lecture for EDSE 512 for Case Study Part 3. We're going back now to Erasto and Misha after doing some critiques, and Case Study Part 3 is one of the most important parts of our course. While I would argue that it may be one of the most time-consuming assignments and one of the most labor-intensive, it is also one of the most wonderful learning opportunities that you'll encounter. So take as much as you can get from this process, not only in the development of the IEP, but in the feedback that you receive. This is an opportunity that will support you in IEP development, whether you've been writing them for a long time in your setting or whether you've not written an IEP for a student yet. So we're reflecting back on previous parts of the case study assignment, and you do have access to all of those documents under the assignments tab, like the most recent evaluation, anything given to you in part 1 or part 2 that can help you to develop the IEP that you'll be writing. We are using Colorado forms for this assignment, so if you're in a different state, you'll be using these anyway, and you can transfer the content to the form used in your state when you are working in the field. The content will be quite similar, the various spots that you're filling in, because they're all IDEA compliant. So to find this form, you're going to go to the CDE IEP Forms website, and you can just type into Google CDE IEP Forms. You're already familiar with this link. You're going to click on Jump to IEP Review, and here it is for you in English. So you can download this form in Microsoft Word format, and this is what you'll be filling in. This will be familiar to you already from some of the critique work that you've done. So for the assignment, we've pulled the form from the Colorado Department of Education website. Then we'll be looking through the rubric, and we're completing the entire IEP document using all of the information that you've received about the student. And in particular, you want to be as comprehensive as possible in the present levels of performance section. So remember, needs drive goals, drive services. Anything that has been provided to you as a result of the evaluation, you want to utilize in that present levels section, whether it's a strength or an area of difficulty, or even if the child is scoring right on grade level and it's not really a strength or a weakness, we want to include all of that information. Remember, this is a case study, so feel free to embellish if developing some more detail helps you to build a foundation for the goals that you're setting and the placement decision that you're making. That is acceptable, because as we've discussed before, case studies are limited and they do not provide us with everything that we might be able to gather in the real world for a child. So feel free to develop more detail for your purposes in this assignment. So you'll see here in the present levels section, you will need baseline data to support the goals and objectives that you write later on in the IEP. So the present levels of performance and the information that you've been given in the previous case study assignments and those PDF documents will provide you with the baseline data that you'll need as you develop your goals. So you will need at least 2 academic goals. 2 is the requirement. If you'd like to add more, feel free. And at least one of the goals will require 2 supporting objectives. So we need to ensure that all of our goals are measurable and observable. We worked hard on this just previously in our Critique 2 assignment. You can refer back to the feedback that you got there and all of the other materials on SMART goals and the value of observable, measurable, operationally defined goals that can be monitored for progress. So we'll talk a little bit more about the IEP development in a moment here, but there is another part of this assignment, and that's a rationale that you'll be submitting. So you are writing 2 to 3 pages. This is a little brief kind of reflection submission. You're talking about why you selected the goals that you did, how they directly relate to the needs and the strengths of the child that you've identified through the present levels of performance section and all of the data that's been given to you in previous case studies. And then you'll be talking about additional goals that you might develop. So even those that are not written in the IEP, what other areas of need do you see? And again, feel free to expand. If you're not given everything you need, you can just build it to have that solid foundation for the goals that you are selecting. And so that's the rationale. It's going to be 2 to 3 pages, just as a written supplement to the IEP that you develop. You do not need to submit the previous documents that you've used for your case study assignments 1 and 2. but we will want to make sure that we're using those forms to support your submissions as necessary. And this is part 3. So you've got the content that you've done for part 1 and 2. You can definitely look back to it. That is acceptable. So you'll see here, obviously, observable and measurable goals. There's another reminder for you in italics and a direction to look at the rubric. So for the cover page, we will want to fill in all of the information here. If you don't have it, again, feel free to make something up. But you'll want to take everything that you've been given in previous case study documents, those PDFs, to develop this IEP. So student and family information, procedural safeguards, IEP participants. And again, this will be going off of information that you've gotten previously. And so that's that participant list. And then we're moving into the present levels section. So the rubric reminds us that we need to get information from all of the assessment that we've done. And this will include the needs and impact statement in the document as we move down below present levels. We'll be hitting on this component. We've worked a lot on what this impact statement should look like in class previously, but I'll just add a few reminders here. Remember, you want to state the disability under which the student is eligible. So you want to state that eligibility category, and you want to talk about how that disability impacts the child and his or her engagement and access to the general education, content curriculum, and classroom, and participation in the school setting. So instead of just talking about general access, we really want to hone in on what particular areas are impacted. So remember, if we have a specific learning disability in reading, we can talk about how that affects a child, obviously in an English language arts class with the reading and writing required for fiction and nonfiction texts, but also as we move into core classes like history or science, and we're reading textbooks with subject matter, what kind of comprehension are we seeing for the student, or what kind of fluency to keep up with that content required. And then as we're moving in even to math, where we think that reading might not be a problem, think about the reading that's required in a math textbook for those narrative components explaining what we're doing for the operations, or think about the reading required for a math word problem. Oftentimes, if we use a lot of word problems in math, a student's grade might be quite low in that math class, and we might think that the child is having problems with math, when in reality, the child might be struggling to understand the word problems, and thus the scores are lower because the real problem is with reading. So remember to be really specific in that needs and impact statement. The next category in the rubric would be the special factors, and that is section 7 of the IEP. So you want to click off each of those, yes or no, and then if this will be addressed, you want to go afterwards to specify and explain or indicate the location of the plan, etc. So you'll just go through each of those and see if they might be applicable for this student in your case study. And how will you know if those are applicable? You'll go through the entire body of evidence given to you and draw conclusions as necessary. Like I said, if you have to fill in the blanks, that's acceptable too. But you'll just want to make sure that you consider each one of those special factors sections very carefully to ensure that you're covering those in a comprehensive manner. And then we're moving along through transition. If this is not relevant for your case study student because of age, you'll be skipping over that. And we'll enter into the goals and objectives section. So as the rubric says, we have a minimum of 2 goals. And above, you'll see the reminder here, at least one must include 2 supporting objectives. And these are both academic goals based upon the baseline data provided to you in the present levels of performance and the results of the most recent evaluation. So we'll want to link these to state standards. So remember, to find those standards, you'll just Google Colorado Academic Standards, and here we are. Again, we'll just go along with that track of reading because that's what we were talking about. Reading, writing, and communicating. Let's say the child is in 6th grade. We can select a standard under, for instance, reading for all purposes. And then we can go through each of these and see which one might apply most closely to the goal that we have selected for the child in the IEP that we're writing. So that information will be added here under related CAS or extended evidence outcomes. So we'll be working off of the Colorado Academic Standards. And going back here, You'll be wanting to select the appropriate evidence outcome or outcomes that are related to the goal that you have set for that child. So the area of need, for instance, would be reading right here. The measurable goal, here's where you'll write it. Unit of measurement, this might be percent accuracy. That's a common one that you'll see. How are you evaluating this? And then from unit of measurement, you'll be moving down to the standard, as we just discussed, the standards that are related to the goal that you've set, the baseline data point, and you can pull that information from the evaluation and from the other documents that have been provided to you, and create what you need as appropriate. As I said, if you need some more specific data, you can develop that for this document. And then for the evaluation method, what will we use? Monitor and chart progress. This is a common one that we might click. Focused assessments, like if you have a math goal, for instance, and you're developing targeted tests or quizzes that are addressing the skill set that you want to work on for that goal. You may click that. Portfolio collection, that might be more related to a writing goal where you're trying to pull together a lot of different work samples that indicate the growth or lack of growth as you're collecting data for that IEP. The progress report will generally be provided at the same schedule that teacher progress reporting is done. So for instance, in the high school setting, that might be at the end of each semester in alignment with the closure of the teacher gradebook periods. And in elementary, if the school's going off of a quarter system, you might see twice per semester. So at the end of each quarter, for instance, that general education teachers are reporting progress. So you'll go through that for at least 2 goals, and then one of those goals we'll have to have the objectives filled out. Then we'll be moving down to accommodations and modifications. You'll be talking about what the student needs to be successful. We've gone over a lot about that, so I'll just let you fill those in based upon the information about the student's needs that you've acquired in those PDF documents. Extended school year, this is where you'll be documenting whether this is appropriate for the child or not. So you'll just go based on the information you've been given, address each of these, and then you'll make a decision for eligibility for extended school year. Again, use your creative license, go based off of what's been provided to you, and fill that section out accordingly. For the state and district assessments, you'll want to be clicking that the student would test with regular assessment, and then if there are accommodations, you'll be listing those here. So oftentimes you'll see if you have an accommodation in the earlier accommodations section for small group or for extended time, for instance, time and a half or double time, you'll be seeing those accommodations coming out on the state or district assessments as well. So you want to list those there for documentation. Same thing for the state assessment section. And then we're moving down to the service delivery statement. And this would be section 13 as well as section 14. So again, this is going to require you to draw connections between the present levels content that you've been provided and the recent evaluations, and then the service providers that you know you have access to, and what kind of service time, direct or indirect, inside or outside the general education classroom, those people might provide. So you'll be filling out all of the boxes and then selecting one of these for frequency and detailing that there. Then you'll be going through the placement determination. So you'll be listing the options that were considered, selecting yes or no, and then ensuring that you've summarized all 3 of these categories: advantages, disadvantages, and the supports that will be put in place to address those concerns, reducing any possible disadvantage to the student. And remember, for any placement, there are advantages and disadvantages. So you want to consider several options, choose yes or no, and then explain why you chose yes for the placement option that you're going with moving forward. The educational environment then would be selected for percentage of time in general education, and that's this section. Prior written notice is this final part here before the rationale paper. This is very important section. So Looking at prior written notice, we need to address any other options that were considered, for instance, a more restrictive or a less restrictive environment, and continue with RTI, something of that nature, and the reason that those were rejected. So base those reasons on evidence. Other factors, any cultural or language factors, any family factors, parent input. Here's a great place to talk about what might be going on with the child that could influence the IEP or the success of the child in the long term. You'll fill out the case manager information. Again, feel free to make something up if you don't have a particular piece of information, and then you'll close.